The year was 1191. The Holy Land was once again in flames. After the fall of Jerusalem in 1187 into the hands of Saladin, the Christian world was shaken by a wave of shock that crossed borders, castles, and entire kingdoms. For the Templar Knights, for the Crusaders, and for every man and woman who carried a cross in their hearts, losing Jerusalem was like losing the very heart of their faith. The response was swift. Kings and armies across Europe mobilized for a new expedition, the Third Crusade. Among them were legendary figures like Richard the Lionheart, the King of England, known for his almost supernatural courage, and his allies, including the Knights Templar, warriors of iron discipline, whose motto echoed, "It is not ours to live, but to die for the glory of Christ." The mission was clear, to reclaim the Holy Land, but the path would be far from simple. Saladin was a brilliant leader, an unrelenting strategist, respected even by his enemies. A clash was inevitable, and Arsuf, a small coastal city north of Jaffa, would become the stage for one of the most unforgettable battles in history. Picture the scene for a moment. Columns of Crusaders marching along the coast of the Mediterranean, the sun scorching their steel armor, dust rising with every step. The Templars at the vanguard, white shields emblazoned with red crosses gleaming, mounted on horses trained to endure fatigue. The sound of waves crashing against the shore mixed with the rhythmic pounding of hooves. But the enemy was near. Hidden among the hills and forests, Saladin's cavalry watched, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The air was thick with tension. Every soldier knew that at any instant they might hear the cry of war, the clash of lances, and the first deadly rain of arrows. The march to Arsuf was a test not only of strength, but of faith. Every step was carried by the hope of reclaiming Jerusalem and by the oath never to give in to fear. The Templars, in silence, prayed within their own hearts, asking God for protection. Many knew they would never see another dawn, but for them, to die in combat against the enemies of the faith was to achieve eternal victory. And so the stage was set. The Mediterranean on the left, the forest on the right, the crusading armies marching toward the inevitable clash, and Saladin's forces waiting patiently for the right moment to crush the invaders. The fate of Arsuf would be written in blood, in courage, and in unshakable faith.
Dawn broke on September 7, 1191. The suffocating heat of the Palestinian summer already made the air tremble before the sun even reached its peak. The Crusader army marched in formation along the coast, shielded by the presence of the Templars and Hospitallers, who guarded the rear and the vanguard. Suddenly, the expected sound erupted, the war cries of Saladin's forces. From the hills and forests poured thousands of Saracen horsemen, mounted archers, unleashing a rain of arrows that darkened the sky. The twang of bowstrings blended with the thunder of hooves, and terror hung like a shadow over the battlefield. But the Templars and Crusaders did not yield. Discipline was their greatest weapon. Even as arrows pierced shields and armor, the formation held firm. Richard the Lionheart, with his legendary bravery, rode along the lines, urging his men to stand strong. It was a battle of nerves. The Christian army needed to keep marching, locked in formation, while the enemy attacks sought to break their line. For hours, the combat was a deadly dance. Saracen archers launched relentless volleys. Cavalry tried to flank the Crusaders, and yet the column endured. Every step was bought with blood and resistance. But the tension grew unbearable. The Templars in the rear, crushed under the relentless assaults, began begging for permission to counterattack. With each passing moment, more men fell, and their pent-up fury threatened to explode. Richard, the cunning strategist, knew that if the cavalry charged at the wrong time, the entire formation could collapse. But if he waited too long, his men would be slaughtered. At last, the moment came. When the pressure seemed unbearable, the order was given. The Templar Knights, their red crosses gleaming in the sun, lowered their lances and thundered forward in a charge that shook the earth itself. The impact was brutal. Dust rose like a wall, and in that instant, the tide of battle began to turn.
The impact of the Templar charge was devastating. Saladin's horsemen, caught off guard by the sheer fury of the assault, were thrown to the ground like leaves in the wind. Lances pierced through armor. War horses thundered forward with unstoppable force. And for a moment, fear shifted to the enemy's side. What had seemed like an endless siege against the Crusaders now turned into a ferocious counterattack. The clash of steel rang out like rolling thunder, and the dust of battle engulfed everything, making it nearly impossible to distinguish friend from foe. In the heart of the chaos, Richard the Lionheart saw his opportunity. He commanded the heavy cavalry to charge alongside the Templars, amplifying the shockwave of the assault. It was no longer just defense. The Christian army was on the offensive. The wall of shields opened, and the knights, gleaming under the scorching sun, stormed into the Saracen lines. Each strike was fueled by faith and desperation, as if every crusader knew that the fate of the crusade was being decided in that very moment. Saladin's warriors, seasoned and fearless, fought back with valor, but the discipline of the Crusader army began to show its strength. With each passing minute, the pressure grew heavier, and the confidence that Saladin had in his relentless tactics started to falter. The battle was no longer just about survival. It was about honor, faith, and glory. The clash at Arsuf echoed far beyond the invisible walls of that battlefield. There, two worlds collided, and every sword raised seemed to carry the weight of history itself. As the sun blazed high in the sky, the Battle of Arsuf reached its climax. The clash of swords and the cries of warriors blended with the deafening thunder of galloping hooves. This
was the decisive moment. Richard the Lionheart, realizing that Saladin's lines were beginning to falter, ordered yet another devastating charge. The Templars, now side by side with the Hospitallers and the heavy cavalry, surged forward with relentless discipline. The impact was so brutal that it shattered the enemy lines like glass under a hammer. Saladin's soldiers, who had placed their hopes in the strategy of exhaustion, were caught off guard. The organization and resilience of the Crusader army prevailed, and soon Saladin's forces began to break apart. The battlefield, which only moments before seemed destined to be the Crusaders' downfall, had turned into the stage of a historic reversal. News of victory spread swiftly among the Christian ranks. Many wept with relief, while others shouted Deus vult, as if they had just witnessed a miracle. It was not only a military victory. It was a triumph of discipline, faith, and courage. Saladin, wise and pragmatic, chose to retreat to preserve his army. The defeat at Arsuf did not end his resistance, but it proved that Richard the Lionheart was a rival worthy of his name. The outcome of the battle was clear. Arsuf established Richard as one of the greatest commanders of Christendom and reignited the Crusaders' spirit. The march toward Jerusalem remained alive, and the memory of that day became a lasting symbol of courage for generations to come.
The Battle of Arsuf was not just a clash of arms, but a moment that echoed through centuries of history. For many chroniclers of the time, that day proved that discipline, strategy, and faith could turn defeat into victory. Richard the Lionheart earned renown not only for his bravery, but also for his ability to unite men from different kingdoms under a single banner. The Templar Knights and the Hospitallers emerged stronger than ever, solidifying their reputation as unmatched warriors and guardians of Christendom. Yet history also reminds us that every victory came at a cost. Lives were lost, families were left in mourning, and the path to Jerusalem remained uncertain. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Still, Arsuf became etched in memory as a symbol of resilience, a reminder that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it, and that faith can be the unseen force sustaining warriors in their darkest hours. Centuries later, the name Arsuf still resounds as a story of leadership, sacrifice, and hope. A reminder that in decisive moments, it is the union of strength and spirit that shapes the course of history. If this story awakened something in you and made you feel the power of the past, remember, there are still many other tales waiting to be told. Every word you share, every gesture of support keeps alive the memories, the symbols, and the secrets that have crossed generations. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment and tell us which part touched you the most. Share your impressions and let your presence be known. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the journeys ahead. If you are not yet part of our brotherhood, this is the moment to join us. Together, we will walk side by side, uncovering the mysteries, the legends, and the legacy of the Knights Templar.